July's webinar is about the TGROW model and the GROW models. We're going to be explaining a little bit more about those as we go through the evening. We are recording this session as we go through, so the webinar can then hopefully be put on the internet. And what I'd like to do is just quickly talk about the control panel for those who may be just joining us and never been with us before. The control panel for GoToWebinar is on the right-hand side if you're on a computer, and it runs across the top of your screen if you're on an iPad. On that control panel, you'll see that there's a questions box, and you're able to type in questions into the question box and ask us any questions you want as we go through, and I can direct those to the panel. If you want the question to go to a specific member of the panel, just type in a name as well, and then I can direct that question there. Sometimes questions can be answered by me, and I'll just type a question back. We try to get through as many of these questions as we can during the night, but sometimes if we get too many, it's not always possible to cover them all. So if there is any outstanding ones that are really important, what we'll do is we'll email you an answer back afterwards about that one when we've finished the webinar. So on the panel this evening, we've got Lin Barrie and Lin Western, two Lins, so hopefully I get them correct as we go along. We're going to call Lin Western, as you'll see on the screen there, is going to be referred to as Linda, and we have Lin Barrie as well. So Lin, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ed. It's good to be here tonight. I'm chairman at the ADINJC and obviously part of the training team, and hugely interested in coaching, and so interested in the GROW model that we're doing tonight.
Thank you, Lynn. And Linda, if you could just give us a quick introduction.
Good evening. My name's Lin Western. I've been a driving instructor for about 29 years. During that time, I also spent 4 years, just under 4 years, as an examiner for cars and lorries. So it's very interesting to be able to see both sides. I have just am completing a coaching course at the moment, my BTEC 4 coaching course. So I've been using GROW and finding it really, really interesting. It's amazing how it affects all parts of your life, not just instruction. So looking forward to it this evening.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much. So that's an introduction of the panel, and I'll just get my screen to work. And for this evening's session, we have a few goals for the session. First goal is to understand the difference of parts of the GROW model and to explain how TGROW might work as well. And we're going to explain those to help you understand them, when to use these models as well, because sometimes it's not just, and you'll find out later in the program, we're going to show you that this model isn't necessarily just used in the driver training industry. But why should you use the models such as these? What benefit is there? And being smart with the models. One or two that have been on some of the courses may be familiar with the SMART and the GROW and how they actually, each letter stands for something and helps you remember the models themselves. And how we can use these different models. Well, the last goal there is using these models to develop coaching conversations. So, Lynn.
Yeah, just to start us off really, to get us in the mood as it were, just thinking about the qualities of a good coach, because if you're a good coach, you're going to just naturally help people get that deeper insight into yourself and how you actually learn and anything that you're engaged in, the activity you're engaged in. So just thinking through those qualities of a good coach. If you're a good coach, you need skills, you need tools at your fingers ready to use, and you need a coaching method. And tonight it's the method that we're looking at. We'll look quickly at the 5 skills here before we move to GROW. So the skills that you need, and I'm sure people listening, you can think for yourself how good you are at all of these things, but The ability to establish and maintain rapport. So you must have good rapport with your pupil. That ability to get them talking, to be interested in them, to make them feel important. Good questioning skills that form part of a conversation, and obviously that's important for GROW. You need to be able to listen, because if you're having a conversation, it's not just about your question. You need to listen in order to be able to ask the next best question. To have intuition and use it, just to get that sense and that feeling that something maybe is a little bit not quite as it should be, not quite normal in the lesson, that somebody's perhaps a little bit tired or not quite themselves, and then you can use that. You can use it to your advantage if you're a coach, because again, that comes back to rapport. And excellent feedback skills, so that you're letting the person you're coaching know how they're getting on, how well they're doing with their goals, and just feedback the whole time during the session so that they understand, and then they know where they can improve as well. And that should just be a natural thing. Those 5 skills are essential for a coach.
Okay, thanks for that, Lynn. A good introduction to it all there, and helping people understand that it's based around the skills as well. And Linda, I think you're just going to give us an introduction here on these next 2 slides. So over to you.
Okay, so one of the methods that we use for coaching is a method called GROW. Now, GROW stands for goals, and this is something that we get the pupil to set their own goals. This was first published by Sir John Whitmore in 1992. He wrote a book called Coaching, which Ed is showing us now. Thank you, Ed. Coaching for Performance. Now, this book has gone global. It's in 30 different countries now, and it's been published in 23 languages. So it's a worldwide thing. It's not just something that we use locally. It isn't just used for driving instruction. It's used for lots of different things. So John Whitmore uses it a lot with tennis and sports coaching. But we use it very successfully for driving. So what GROW stands for? The first one, G, is for goals. Now we're going to go through this in much more depth later. We're all going to have a little talk to you about it. So we've got goals, then we have reality. O is for options, and W is for way forwards. So what we're going to do now is going to look at breaking all of this down and explain what it all means. So this can be expanded. So just from GROW, we can actually use TGROW. Now this T stands for topic, because sometimes when a pupil is trying to set a goal, we need to give them a topic, or they need to set a topic themselves. Again, Ed's going to deal with that a little bit for you, a little bit more depth.
Yep.
But
Yep.
We're going to have topic, goal, reality, opportunities, and way forwards. So I think that's for you now, Ed, to take over.
Thanks for that, Linda. And with the GROW model, I think it's quite important to mention that it doesn't always have to flow in the same way. It can change and mold and morph into different ways around it. Sometimes you might have to look at the reality first of what's being done, or even look at opportunities for learning before you actually even choose a topic or a goal. So that when we're going through this, guys, when you're out there driving, it's important to think that the GROW model is there, and there's each aspect. It's just an easy method to remember TGROW or GROW in the format it is, and then you can morph it into different things. But we're just going to go through this in the general way that it's laid out on here. And the first one we're going to start with is topic. Now, as Linda said there, it can be the pupil who chooses the topic, or it can be the instructor that suggests a range or specific topics. So quite often when you pupil gets in the car and they've had one of those days where it's, you ask them the usual question and you get, I don't know what I want to do today. So it can be quite often the time to then step in and help the learner in what they're doing. And after you've had a recap, and I think the one thing that I find really that helps establish where the topic's going to come from is the recap that you have right at the very beginning of your previous lesson, or if it's a recap in part way through, because the other thing is that this isn't just used at the very beginning of the lesson, it can be used anywhere through the lesson, and it helps, as we said, develop a coaching conversation. So to actually get to the topic can be either a pupil's choice or an instructor's suggestion, and then the pupil can maybe go a little bit deeper into the subject and choose the goals that are set from the topic itself. And for some reason, this isn't clicking forward. There we go. And that's something that you want to be coming in. I'm going to leave that one there because that's something you're going to come in with, Lynn, about the goal itself. So over to you for goals, Lynn.
Okay, well, I mean, we're looking at GROW, so the G stands for the goal, but you may know these as aims or targets or objectives. They might all be words that you've used before, but basically they're all the same thing. It's what we're going to try and achieve. And really, let's just think for a moment why we need a goal. It inspires you, it challenges you, it motivates you. It makes you sort of own your learning, if you like. It's far more important to somebody if they own the learning. And if they set their own goals, then they're more likely to be doing that. So goals can be either long-term or short-term. You need both. At a training day yesterday that we did, we asked what most people thought their pupils' long-term goals were. And of course, we came up with things like pass the theory test, pass the practical test, be a good driver, be able to drive by such and such a month. So these are all long-term ones, and that's great. But basically, they need short-term ones then to get to those long-term ones eventually. And they need to understand that themselves. So that's really why we need goals, for this sort of personal satisfaction it'll give somebody. The most important thing here as well is that really these are led by the pupil. So although we can suggest a topic here, the pupil needs to be the one that ultimately decides on the goal. And unless we're using TGROW where the instructor suggests the topic, which is fine because that can be really helpful at times, then let's get this from the pupil, because then again they own it and it's theirs. SMART goals, because this is quite a good acronym actually. Try and make them specific, because when I listen sometimes to what ADI suggests and talk over with their pupils as goals, they tend to be rather too broad. So try and make them specific in as much as, rather than just say something like, let's improve roundabouts, let's improve junctions, that's really large. Why not be more specific and say something like, and suggest and together decide that you're going to improve the speed that you approach junctions at, or make sure that you're improving the lane discipline on the roundabouts, or make sure that the goal is to understand different types of roundabouts. So hopefully you can see where I'm coming from. It's slightly more specific. It's not so huge, because if you look at the rest of this, it helps it be one of those other ones. It helps it be measurable. Because if you have got a specific goal, it's much easier to measure. During the lesson, you can go back to it and say, how are we getting on with that goal? You can measure where you are, and you can measure when you've completed it and when you're successful at it. If they're SMART goals, they'll be attainable. I'll actually use the word attainable or agreed. And they'll be realistic, because it's no good if your goals are so unrealistic, you're never ever going to manage to attain them. So realistic, so that they are attainable, and time bound, so that you know exactly when you're hoping to have achieved this by. not all goals will be 100% achieved by the end of every lesson, but you need to be able to say and measure where you are with them and how much longer time bound you think you're going to be spending on them. So that's what we mean by SMART goals. Is that enough on goals, Ed? Is that
Yeah, because
what you wanted?
we did cover the topic of goals on the last webinar that you and I did, didn't we? So really, that was quite a good
Yeah.
recap from that. I'm sure some of the attendees will have been on that last one. I recognise some of the names as we were looking at them earlier. So yeah, thanks very much for that. So the next part of the GROW model is the R for reality, or realistic. So Linda, if you'd like to have a look at this one.
Okay, so as in GROW, we're looking at the R now for realistic or reality. As we all know, pupils aren't necessarily always realistic with their expectations, and as we know with a SMART goal, we do need to make sure it's realistic, and we have to sometimes guide them to make sure it's realistic. So the first thing we're going to look at is, where are they now? Where are you now? Is this a first lesson? Are they setting a goal for their second lesson? So they've just had a first lesson, they're going to go on to a second lesson. They may say to us that they want to do dual carriageways. They may say that they want to do reverse parking. Now, is this realistic? If they wanted to go on dual carriageways on their second driving lesson, and we've not really even taken them out on the road, is that realistic? So we can then perhaps get them to address that as perhaps a long-term goal. So we're moving around with the GROW model again. We're perhaps taking it back and then thinking about whether that's going to be a long-term goal. What do we need to be able to get ourselves there? So in reality, how will we get to that goal? How would we get to being ready to go on dual carriageways? What do we need to get there? What barriers are there? So what would stop them from going on a dual carriageway on their second lesson? Another thing we use with reality and realistic is getting them to scale themselves. And this is a tool that I use an awful lot, and I find it's really, really useful with pupils, is asking them to scale where they think they are on a particular topic, a particular goal. So if they wanted to perhaps improve their approach speed, as Lynn said, on a roundabout, where do they think they are on a scale from 1 to 10? Where do they think they are now? So it's really important when setting scales that we make it clear that they understand what the scale means. So 1 is that they're really nervous of approach speed, and 10 is that they're really confident. And if the instructor understands this and the pupil understands that, we can scale properly. Get the pupil to scale it before and scale after. And let's see then if we've got a measurable outcome. So being realistic is getting the pupil to understand the reality of the situation. Are they ready for this? What do they need to do to get ready for this situation, for the goal that they've set? Do they think this goal is obtainable? Is it realistic for the situation at the time? So, Ed,
Yeah.
is that enough covered
Thank
for you there?
Thanks very much. Yeah, Linda. Yeah. Did you go through the beliefs bit about challenging beliefs with the reality?
No. So challenging their beliefs, it can be, they may have let's say, coming up to a red traffic light, for instance. They've come up to an amber traffic light many, many times. They believe it's safe to go through an amber light. Then one day, it isn't safe to go through that amber light. So we do need to challenge their beliefs in the reality side of it as well. Talk to them about why they believe things is their belief. Why have they always felt safe going through an amber light? Is it because perhaps they've always gone through an amber light with their parents before and nothing's ever happened? On that one occasion, something will happen. So we need to make them understand the reality of situations by challenging their beliefs.
Yeah, that's great.
That,
yeah, that's great. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the biggest ones that I go through with in this stage is the beliefs and also the scaling, like yourself. And I think that's because we've both done BTEC 4, and I know Lynn's done the studying down at the was it UAE, University of London, when you went on that course,
Eastern,
Lynn?
Eastern,
Yeah,
yeah, the postgraduate course, yeah.
yeah. And scaling emotions is really a really big important part, because quite often when I'm in the back with ADIs, I hear a lot of people scaling. Well, how did you rate reversing around that corner? And the pupil will say about how they actually think and about the corner itself, and that's too big to scale. Is how did they actually feel about reversing around the corner? I think the scaling is really important to actually come down to, as Linda said, where an emotion starts to affect the way that they're driving. And it's how are they then going to overcome that emotion? If they can get a scale on where that emotion is, especially nervousness or other nerves, I can't think of the top of my head of other emotions that we'd actually want to look at. But then they can set a goal as to how they'd overcome that and move it forward. So, yeah. Lynn, do you want to add anything else to that one? Have you any other points?
No, no, that's
Yeah.
covered.
Right. Okay. So, O for opportunities and options for learning and developing. Just bear with me one second. I'm just going to have to move my screen over a little bit. That suitable opportunities for learning. Once you've gone through the reality stage and you've sort of looked at how you're going to move things forward, it's then looking at the opportunities of where that learning is going to take place and how that's going to then develop further. And a key thing to think about then is thinking about the practice areas and getting the right sort of practice area to go into and look at how this learning is going to be. Is it going to be a case that you've been busier traffic and you're going to have to take it back and look at a lower level? And it's discussing this with the pupil, because it should be them really that's maybe got the most influence over that practice area, rather than us saying, oh, we'll go back around that corner again and do it again. And then maybe with the scaling, you may be finding that they're petrified of that corner. So maybe you need to lower it back and just wind back a little bit and find another area that's got something similar but easier for them. Or is it too easy? And do you need to scale it up? And having a conversation with your pupil about that opportunity is going to be important. The other thing is that sometimes life situations and looking at different places, for instance, busy roundabouts, if something's gone on, taking them there, parking up, get out of the car, walk into it. If it's a fine day, in this weather that we've had lately, it'll be great doing that. You maybe have to put the sun cream on first before you go. But getting out into the live situation and looking at that and observing what's gone on, and then talking through, get the pupil talking about what other traffic's doing. Let them see how the opportunity could influence the way that they're driving. That goes back to the previous section where we're talking about beliefs, and this may then start to change beliefs about how they do something. Because for anybody to want to change, they've really the change has to come from within them. We can tell them all sorts of things, we can give them all sorts of solutions, but until somebody actually sees and believes that they want to change, they'll not change. And using different opportunities for learning is going to be one way around that. And then you can start asking, is there any way that you could do things differently? And then look at the options for maybe looking at that. Do we need to use demonstrations? Mind mapping is a great one for the creative mind, and this is something that Lynn and I were talking about at a course that we did last Wednesday, about using the different minds that we've got, creative or logical people. Some of the logical people, they'll maybe want to get writing and looking at diagrams, whereas some people that are more creative may want mind maps and drawings. Yeah. And have a discussion, which comes back to the opportunities where you get them out of the car and just watch something going on. So lots of different ways to work around that O. Something for you to think about there, with learning opportunities for developing. Has either of the panel got anything they want to add to that?
No. Not really on
No.
options. I mean, it's obviously you can just ask them what their options are, what sort of options they've got. It leads into quite a good discussion because sometimes there is more than one way to do something.
Yeah.
Also, I think, Ed, the options depend on their different learning style as well. By building up a good coaching conversation and good rapport with your pupil, you learn at a very early stage what learning style they have. And the different options can be aimed at their different learning styles. As you said, the mind mapping is someone that's definitely a read-write learner. Is much more adapt to using mind mapping. I struggle with mind mapping because I'm a lot more kinesthetic myself. I like to do things.
Yeah.
So I don't use mind mapping, but I have to be very mindful that I've got pupils that do like using mind mapping. So with the opportunities and the options, I think we as instructors have to remember to use up the options that appeals to the pupil and is for their learning style rather than for our learning style. We shouldn't give our pupils the options that suit us. We should give them the options that suit themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that Lynn and I have been looking at just lately is the taking learning styles a stage further and using what we call 7 intelligences. And it's a new course that we're looking to hope to bring in, which is about how you actually learn. The course is about enhanced learning, and with the 7 intelligences, it goes even deeper than the VARC. And it goes into things as using music, looking at the logical brain, looking at how we transfer learning across from one side of the brain to the other. But that's going into a whole different area there. I'm going to keep that one for a little bit, but that's just a taster for something that's going to come up in the future. I think we'll be doing a webinar about that one as well, won't we, Lynn, at some point? And
Definitely.
yeah, it's a whole different area. It takes the VARC so much deeper. But you're absolutely right with that, Linda. It's looking at the way that people learn and um, expanding on that. Just one thing that Tony's written here, and this is quite a good one that's just come across on the question box. Opportunities is using reflective logs. Because for people that are, as you say, Linda, the writing in the VARC one, the read write one, using reflective logs is a really good method of learning, and having an order for people to be able to do reflection.
Mm.
So, um, we've got Lynn with the way forward.
Okay, so we've got the will or the way forward for the W. This is obviously the last step. It's where we're going to clearly define what we're going to do, which way we're going to be going here. And also, I think as a coach, you're looking for the commitment from the person that we are really going to do this now. So to me, that's what the way forward and the will is all about. So the sorts of questions that you might be asking at this sort of stage: what is the next step? What time scale are you going to put on achieving this? When you're going to start? Things like, what do you need to think about now to be able to do that? Is there anything else? Don't always accept the first thing that somebody might say. Give them time. Listen. Remember, that was one of the skills. You might say anything else if you feel that there's something else still there to come. If you really want to know how committed somebody is to doing this, and of course this all depends what the goals are, but if this is something about, for example, taking a practical test in a certain time, then scaling could come in here. You know, on the scale of 1 to 10 here, how determined are you to succeed with this? Make them think about it, make them become actually committed to doing it. What would it take to make that a 10? And what resources are you going to need now to help you actually do this? Is there anything missing? Is there anything I can do to help you more? I'm not suggesting you'll be using all these questions. The skill of a real coach is to know which of these questions to use depending on how the conversation's going. So this is how we would end the GROW model. But remember, it's a cycle. We can go round it again and we can dip in and out of it as well. It helps solve problems and it helps to clearly set goals. So that really is where it's so valuable.
Right, and you were talking about a cleaner cycle. Sorry, go on, Lynn.
Yeah, we've got the cycle. Yeah, you're going to show us the cycle now, Ed.
There you go. Yeah, and you've got a nice little story about this one, haven't you? Where you've used it not in driver education, you've used it with your daughter, I believe it was.
Well, I used it a couple of, well, about a month ago, really. I think sometimes we use this, when we get good with coaching conversations, we use it without realising what we're doing. It occurred to me afterwards that actually what we discussed went through the GROW model, but we did it as sort of mum and daughter. She's a graphic designer. She's a junior graphic designer. She left uni about 3 years ago, got a job. And she is getting a little bit fed up in this job now because there is no way at the particular place she is that she can go forward there. There just isn't the scope to do that. They weren't prepared and they said they couldn't pay her more money. So she's reasonably ambitious. So she decided she was just getting a bit fed up. She wanted to do something about it. So the first thing we did was establish what she wanted to do. And that really was, well, I'd quite like to stay there, but I can't. Because if I do, it's just I'm not going to get any further. I want to get another job. Okay, so that was really the goal, and that is quite big, but she was determined she was going to do that. So then we looked at the reality of it. We looked at the reality from the point of view of where she wanted to work. Did she want to have to leave the accommodation that she's in now to get somewhere different? The travelling, the amount of money. So we were looking at the reality of it all. Then we started to look at the options where she could look for jobs, find jobs, where she was going to go, what she was going to do, that she needed to make her CV better, that she needed to get her own little website better because it's a creative job and you need a creative website to go with it. And then we decided what the plan of action was, basically, exactly what she was going to do. So whiz forward about 4 weeks and she'd got 4 interviews, all going on at the same time, and then suddenly we had 2 job offers. So then we were in another dilemma, and instead of Mum, I'm fed up of work, it was Mum, I don't know which job to take. One was giving her more money than the other, but one was further away, so there would have been more travelling. So again, we went back, said, well, hang on a minute, what were the goals? And what do you really want to do now? Let's think about both jobs. What's the reality of the 2 jobs? What's the reality of the amount of money you're going to spend on your train fares in relation to staying in the city that you're in now with the other job? What options have you got? Which one would you prefer to do? And finally, we had the plan of action. She decided which she was going to do, and she now has a new job that she starts in a week or 2's time. So it's all worked. But basically, we followed that GROW model through and we had conversations that went through those 4 phases. She didn't realise, in fact, I don't think I did when we were talking, but certainly we used the GROW model. It's not just used in driving, but I think it's fantastic in this ADI industry because it's such an easy one to use. It's the best used coaching model. And the thing to remember about it is that it's solution-based, it's focused on solutions, and that's why it's so good for what we do.
Yeah, I just noticed something as I was listening to that, Lynn. When you first started talking about it, you actually looked at the reality option first. So you looked at where you were now before you started to establish a goal, and that's what we're meaning exactly at the beginning, that it doesn't have to be used in the order that you're doing. Quite often it is good to look at the reality of where you are before you can even come to a goal, because without looking at that, the goal can't be clearly defined.
Yeah, you can dip in and out, yes, certainly.
Yeah, and just got a question for either of you. No, it's not directed at anybody, this, so either of you can come in with this one. Can I come in and out of the cycle, or do I have to complete it first? And I think that sort of just sums up what you've done there, doesn't it? Yeah. You don't even have to go all the way through it, I don't think. So that's
you can come in and out of it, Ed. Sorry, Ed. You can come in and out of it. I think eventually you will go round the whole thing, because if you don't, you won't have that final way forward and the commitment bit to actually do it. But you can certainly dip in and out of it, yeah.
Yeah. Just reading something that was just come up through here. Just give me 1 second, guys. Lynn, do you just want to go through? Oh, go on, Linda.
I was just going to say, sometimes people set goals and the goal is a long-term goal. So we then have to, when we look at the reality of it, we know that that goal isn't achievable in this time frame. So we then have to go back to reset the goal. So quite often we double up. We go over and over a goal, the reality, the goal, and then maybe go on to the options. So we can use one part of it, probably the goal and reality, a few times before we go to the options and the way forwards.
Yeah, and I think that actually ties in with what Kevin's put on here. This was quite a long one. Sorry, guys, I had to read through this one to find out how to simplify this over a question. What Kevin does is he uses video quite a lot. And because of, like you, Linda, he's having to use the cameras on test. He's finding it quite useful to review this with the pupil and look at where they could improve. And his question is, where could this be used in the TGROW? So how would you fit it in with videos? Do either of you use video?
I use a video for recording outside of the car. I don't very often play it back, I have to say. I normally pull over and discuss a situation rather than play back the video. Yeah, it would come into probably the reality. Maybe scaling is where you'd probably be using the video and you're going to look at it and then scale, well, how do you think that went? What do you think you could have done better there? Get them to look at it themselves. It's an interesting one, the videos. I've not really used them myself, so I can't really say too much about that, I'm afraid.
Yes, Lynn.
Hi, Ed. I've used it in the past with ADI training particularly, and it was really helpful with that, just to let somebody look back through and then think about, what they thought they'd done, the real reality of it, the options and different ways we could go, and then what we were going to do next. So I think using a video can be very, very useful, actually, and looking back at them. It's just a time thing, isn't it, in an hour's lesson, as to whether you've got time to do that, or whether you take part of it and bring just a little part of it back to the next session. But there's nothing wrong with using it. I think it would be really good. It would certainly bring the GROW model in.
Yes, it would. Yeah, I think that was quite a key one. As I was thinking about it, you've hit on it. It's the options, isn't it? And looking at how you could change what you've actually done, and looking for that development. It's the development stage, isn't it? And for me, the development sits quite neatly in options. So, does that sort of answer your question, Kevin, or do you want to take that a little further? Can you just answer me yes or no if that's answered it? Okay, thanks. And it'll come up on the questions box. I have one here. Can the recap be the reality to set the goal? And I think yes, definitely, because the recap at the beginning of the lesson is what at a very important stage to help that step forward. So I would think, yeah, definitely, Frank. Go with that recap. From the recap, look at the options. Look at the reality of how it there. So the recap can sit in options as well, to help establish the goal. Lynn.
Can I just say there that yes, definitely, and the goals will have been the goals from the last lesson. So the goals you're looking at there were the goals last time, then the recap becomes the reality bit, then you're looking at options of what you're going to do next, and then you're coming back round to the new goals that you're going to make. So yes, perfect.
Yeah. Kevin has said yes, thanks. So we've answered Kevin's question quite nicely there. Has that answered your question there, Frank? If you can just give us a yes or a no. I've got one for you guys just while I read another long one. Do you need to tell your pupil, I think this is quite an interesting one, this. Do you need to tell your pupil that I'm using GROW?
No. I think my pupils know that the way they're taught is done in a coaching style. But I don't think I need to stand there and sit there and say I'm using the GROW model now. It's not important. It doesn't matter that that's happening. To me, that's not an essential part of it. When I talked, excuse me, to my daughter, I didn't say to her I'm using the GROW model. I think that would have been really off-putting, to be honest. It stops the flow of what you're doing. And the thing about the GROW model is it just flows as a conversation. Certainly don't need to tell people you're using it.
No, no. The one that I've just read through was really just a summing up. I think Tony's just put it in his own words here. Yeah, I think you're right with what you've written there, Tony. The GROW model is a concept, as a framework, and it can be developed with students. Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got sort of the grips of where that can be there.
Ed,
Yes, Linda.
also, they use this model a lot in schools now.
Yeah.
A lot of the teachers are being using this. So the students nowadays are brought up around the GROW model without knowing. If you asked a pupil about GROW, they wouldn't understand it, but they're used to setting goals at school and being looking at the reality, looking at the options and planning forward. They're getting used to this in all aspects of life now, not just driving, in coaching, if they do sports, if they do teaching at school. Most of the universities are using it definitely now. So I don't think they would realise they were doing it because it's what they do as in general now.
Yeah. It's also used in business. I've used it in business to business coaching, and I've worked around the GROW model with that. And I think one of Sir John Whitmore's partners, when they were developing the GROW model, I think he used it in business as well. So it's all sorts of different areas it works. Life coaching works in as well. Just to answer your question here, Andrew, we've mentioned VARK, not bark. I think I'm barking mad. We've mentioned VARK a few times. VARK is, if you type VARK into Google, Andrew, you'll come up with a really neat questionnaire that you can actually fill in, and this is a questionnaire that I think it's got 20 questions on it. There's sometimes more. And it asks you certain questions about how you would actually find a solution to something. And it's visual, audio, read, write, and kinesthetic. I've got those right, haven't I, Linda? Yeah.
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 It's to find out your learning style, isn't it?
It's to define a learning style.
If that's the method, yeah. If that's the method we're going to use, there's lots of ways to define learning styles. That's just one of them. That's one of the easier ones.
Yeah, it's quite a simplistic method, and it's sometimes quite a good one if you're unsure about a pupil. If you've got especially if you've got a pupil that's in learning, quite a lot of the learners have heard of VARK as well, because that's another popular one that's used in schools and education now. Some of the schools and some of the profilers use VARK questionnaires to do profiles. So Google VARK, visual, audio, read, write, kinesthetic.
Also, Ed, if you ask the pupil if they know their learning style, quite often, because as you said, it's used in school so much now, they already know their learning style and they can tell you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Here's a good one. I'll ask Lynne this one. Who invented TGROW, Lynne?
TGROW? I honestly don't know, so we'll have to come back with that one or send that one out. I don't know, to be honest. It's not in coaching for performance, no. But I have on other courses heard about TGROW since then. I'm not sure I could say exactly where that's from.
No.
I wouldn't like to put, somebody's name to it and say that's where that's from. But as a suggestion, it's a really good way of changing grow into something a little bit more specific. But it's not a question I've ever really thought about, to be perfectly honest, where it's that particular one's come from.
If anybody
We'll
can,
find out.
yeah, if anybody can just get on Google now, and maybe Dave, can you just go on Google and Google that one for us? Because
Wikipedia is always a good one.
Sorry?
Wikipedia is good.
Yeah.
Wikipedia is good for, finding out. Yeah.
Yeah. So just have a quick Google, see if we can get an answer to that. Andrew just put many thanks. Yes.
Ed, I've just Googled it, and it comes up with grow.
Yeah.
TGROW doesn't come up.
Doesn't come up.
Wikipedia.
Right. No. Okay. So it's maybe.
I'm sure someone else.
Yeah. Did you come across it at UAE, Lynn?
No, I didn't. Although I know you did.
Yeah. Did Lynn? Did you come up with it at London?
No, we didn't come up with that at London at the time. No, but remember that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. So no.
The first time I came across it was when I did my BTEC 4. That's where I heard about it and came up with it, and it sort of fits with what we did. But that was the first time I came across it, and I've never actually taken the time to do any research into where it actually came from. I just know it works. And that's it for the questions. We haven't any questions unless anybody types one in very quickly. We'll just finish the last few slides off. Oh, there we go. Grow was growing. Thank you for listening tonight. It's been a pleasure having you all there, and thank you for all the questions that came. We had a big flurry of questions come in there at the end. Many thanks to everybody that's put questions in there. The next webinar, the one for your diary, is Tuesday, August the 30th at 8 o'clock, and we'll be looking at driving on motorways and overtaking that night. So I'll just... No more questions have come in. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Good night.